Welcome to the Clinical Podcast Series brought to you by the American Academy of Optometry Foundation. The topic for this episode is performing multiple visual fields at the same visit yields valuable results. And now I'd like to thank our host, Gretchen Bailey, our topical expert, Dr. Jack Fu, and our topical editor, Dr. Andrew Rickson. And now it's my pleasure to turn it to Gretchen in the studio.
Hi, everyone. I am Gretchen Bailey. I am a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Jack Fu. He's in Sydney, Australia, and he is also a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, and as well, he is a diplomate in the glaucoma section. So, Jack, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thanks, Gretchen. Pleasure to be here.
Today, we're going to be talking about a glaucoma study, talking about performing multiple visual fields. And in fact, this study is titled Viability of Performing Multiple 24-2 Visual Field Exams at the Same Clinical Visit. And you are lead author on this study, and this was recently published in AJO. So can you tell me a little bit about this study, how you set it up and what some of the results were?
Yeah, thanks, Gretchen. This study is a pet topic of ours, and we've been very, very excited to do this study for a very long time. And we know from historical work, especially out from the UK, that computer simulation models show you need a lot of visual field data in order to be confident in detecting visual field progression in patients with glaucoma. And it's simply because visual field results are notoriously variable. We know that our patients can have results that swing massively, even between tests, even within the same day. And so we kept thinking to ourselves, is there a possible strategy for us to get lots and lots of clinical data, even just within the same visit? Because the last thing we want to do is maybe bring our patients back week after week after week to get visual field results that might be variable. And so with the release of SITA-FASTA from Zeiss, I think a couple of years back now, that model became a possibility. So what we did is at the moment we got SITA-FASTA, we were like, okay, in our clinic, we're just going to be doing 2 fields on every single patient, and we're going to see what happens. And that's where the study was born. The front-loading field study, which effectively means to do multiple fields per patient per clinical visit. And basically, we just measured the outcomes. We wanted to see reliability, the comparison between fields and their outcomes.
Well, what were the results of your study?
Yeah, so I think when we did our first study looking at SITA-FASTA, what we found was that a lot of the results didn't necessarily meet so-called traditional reliability criteria like false positive results and what we dubbed seeding point errors. And gaze tracker was okay, but those two were the main points of concern. And so based on our own predictive models, we were thinking, okay, if we can even get like only 10% of fields that were excluded, we'll be happy. We'll be very satisfied that we have enough clinical data for use. But what we found was that over 90% of our patients were able to return at least one visual field that was reliable. And about 2/3 of patients were able to return 2 visual field results that were reliable. And so that was really heartening for us. We now had a subset of patients that had 2 visual field results from the same visit. So the next important step for us was to say, well, are those 2 results similar? Because if you have one result up here and one result down there, then they would be completely useless. But what we found was that there was so much internal correlation. So the mean deviation, pattern standard deviation, number of defects, the sensitivity results were all highly correlated between those 2 results. So in 2/3 of patients where we're front loading the visual field tests, we were able to get 2 data points that would be useful for future progression analysis, for diagnosis, and increase the confidence for our clinical team.
That's really great news and great information. And I know for practicing optometrists, time is a very big factor in obtaining visual field results because there is a time investment on the part of the patient as well as on the part of the practice from the doctor. depending upon where the field machine is located in the practice, if there's a technician or staff member who's available to be there with the patient to help administer the test. So, what do your results tell practicing ODs about obtaining better visual field results as well as keeping the time factor in mind?
Yeah, that's a really important question and a really important consideration, because the last thing you want is a really good test that takes forever to do. It's just not practical to implement in a busy clinical practice. And that's where Sitter Faster comes in. And if we were to do the same approach with the old Sitter standard, it would take forever. But what found is that you can do 2 Sitter Faster tests in the time it would take you to do 1 Sitter standard test. And even then, it would probably still be even faster than that. So on average, I think I remember it was about 8.5 minutes of visual field testing time to get 4 visual field results. So just in 8 minutes time, you can get 4 whole visual field results for 1 patient.
That's not bad.
Yeah, it's a fantastic time. I mean, of course, you still have to add like the setup and stuff, but what this means is that you don't have to bring them back on another day. You don't have to invest another appointment slot in the future as well. And your question is so important, because we not only have to consider our workflow, like from the clinicians and technicians, but we also have to consider the patient's feeling as well. Do they really find it acceptable to sit through 4 visual field tests? And as part of the study, we actually did a follow-up study where we surveyed our patients and we asked them, how do you feel about doing multiple tests if it gives us more information? And I think it was like 94, 95% of them were overwhelmingly in agreement that it was perfectly acceptable to sit through more visual field tests if it benefits their clinical care. And we published that in Clinical Experimental Optometry, I think, a few months ago. And a similar group from the University of Melbourne also had a similar outcome in their cohort. So it was very reassuring.
That's great information, Jack. Thank you so much for talking with me about this study today.
Thanks, Gretchen.
And a special thanks to CooperVision for their educational grant to make it all happen.